Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All in All with Alex. I'm your host, of course, Alex. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Dr. Jenny. I don't want to try to say your last name. I'm probably going to mess it up. I know a lot of people probably do. So, why don't you let the people know, um, how to say your name, and then also give a little bit of background about yourself.
You got it. Sure. So my last name is Tufenkian, and it's not as scary as it looks. It's pretty much how it sounds, and it means son of a gun. So you can always remember that part. It means, yeah, it actually does. Yeah. So I am a naturopathic physician. I've been practicing for a couple of decades, and my journey has really led me into helping people who are struggling with chronic illness that doesn't get answers other places. And in particular, something called myalgic encephalitis, which used to be called chronic fatigue syndrome, and also long COVID. And these are really conditions that found me. I got them when I probably had them when I was younger, when I was in high school. I was really exhausted. I went into the doctor at Kaiser Permanente. They said, "You don't have strep, you don't have mono, you're probably trying to just skip out of school, get back to school, kid." And it was pretty rough to get that news. Later, I had different times, different experiences where I didn't have the energy that my friends had to do things, but I just kind of put it aside. And it wasn't until I hit my second year of medical school and I was trying to have my second child. I had a couple of miscarriages, and at 17 weeks, I miscarried and lost a baby. And I know you've been through that grief of losing a child. It's not easy. Um, it threw me into what I call the dark night of the soul, where I was absolutely exhausted. And I really see that we have a physical body, a mental, emotional, and an energetic level to our being. This is something that we can now measure with science. It's not just a woo-woo concept. And you can sometimes when you have a hard time, like one of those systems is down, like you go through a really hard relationship thing, like you're emotionally down, or you go through some big like existential crisis and your energetic system's down, or you get really sick and your physical system's down. But when all three are down, it's like it's a dark night of the soul time. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I was stuck in bed and I had to be walked to the bathroom, and I had IVs in my arm to eat. And people later confessed they thought I was going to die during that time. I was so sick. I was able to get a lot of help from different people that came to my bedside to work with me. And after months, I broke through and came out of the depression and the suicidal ideation and the severe anxiety. And I moved from what I call from the bed to the couch. And I had to take a year out of medical school. I was so exhausted. But through everything I knew at it as a medical student, and then as a young doctor, and halfway through my residency, first year residency, as a primary care doctor in naturopathic medicine, I finally broke through and I figured out the last piece of the puzzle, and I had all of my energy back. Had another kid, open clinics, never thought I'd get it again. And the gift of that time was I really understood how sick you can be and how much the body can heal. I mean, you talk about going through hard times and having resilience. Like, we are incredibly resilient as human beings in our spirit and in our body. And that's what I experienced. And so it really allowed me to be with my patients in a whole different way. As a young new doctor, I felt like my experience really opened my eyes, and I was able to be present to those who were struggling in a whole new way. And that was a huge gift for me. And I myself grew a lot on many levels through that process. I felt really lucky to have all of my energy back. And then I ended up having what I call a perfect storm, where I had an accident, an injury, severe pain, sleep. I couldn't sleep because of the pain. And I had a sprinkling of perimenopause on top, which is this crazy hormonal thing you go through as a woman in your 40s and 50s. And it just whacked out my system. And that's when I learned a second truism about myalgic encephalitis, long COVID, chronic fatigue, is that you can relapse really fast. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at that dark hole that I fell into, and it's like, whoosh, like all of a sudden, I was afraid I was going to be back in bed, but for me to go back in bed at that time would have meant bankruptcy from my family, because they were financially independent on me for my work, as were all my employees and my clinic and everything. And I really had to figure out what was wrong. So I couldn't sleep. So I stayed up at night and I just researched and I researched and I researched until I could figure out what was happening to what caused what they called then chronic fatigue syndrome. They now call myalgic encephalitis, and began to trial and error things on myself. And usually when I was really sick, if I was tired or something was going on in my life, my patients would kind of disappear and give me a break. It was this thing that I called the magic universe of my clinical schedule. If I was doing well, it was full. If I was tired, it would go away. I assumed my schedule would be vacant, except the opposite happened. I was booked out for months with a huge waiting list, and they were all people with chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalitis symptoms. And I had the gift of the opportunity of taking what I was learning, what I was trialing on myself to work with these patients. And I began to see that there are very specific patterns that come up. And there are 5 typical patterns that are root causes for people with this pattern, and began to see who responds to which kinds of treatments. And there's not one cause and there's not one treatment for everyone. It's really needs individualized, personalized approach to get through this chronic illness that people call of this myalgic encephalitis, chronic fatigue, long COVID picture. And that has become my work. And so I've gone off to, that's what I focus on. And I ended up, when we had the pandemic, I was pretty sure we were going to have a serious uptick of this condition. And indeed we did. And it's called long COVID. I was pretty sure what I knew would apply. And then I got to practice on myself once again because I got long COVID. I got COVID. I had a couple of predisposing things, including a really messed up gut, which increases your risk. If you get COVID when you have a messed up gut, as in a microbiome that's off, diarrhea, constipation, IBS, those kinds of things. I had just had food poisoning. Then you were much more increased to get long COVID. And I'd also been under severe emotional stress right before that. And those 2 things really ticked the boxes for me to have what I would call a relapse. And so now I get to see what long COVID is like, and I get to work from it from the inside, as I'm also working with clients and teaching others how to understand this process better.
Right, yeah, yeah. That's ooh. Sounds like you've been through a lot. Sounds pretty rough.
1 or 2 things in my years, as have you, I know.
So even through all that, I mean, you were able to overcome all that adversity and to still be able to be out in the world and help other people get through it, and then also coming on the podcast and spreading the word about it, so that way anyone that may be dealing with it, they say, hey, my doctor can't figure out what's going on with me. I don't know what it is. It's something, but I know, because us as humans, 9 times out of 10, we know when something's wrong with us. We're like, hey, something's not
Totally.
something's not right. Something's not right. I can't get any answers. So now you being able to go out on these platforms and talk to people, and now that may be people like, I think this is what I have. So now they can maybe, I don't know if you offer some kind of like maybe a video consultation for anybody that doesn't live nearby or something like that. And then if so, where could they find that?
Yeah, yes, I do. And you can go onto my website, drjennytufenkian.com, drjennytufenkian.com. And on there is information about working with me. And for those of you who feel like you're struggling with this and are ready to do the work, you can apply to book a call. And I do a free 30-minute call to see if we're a good match. I only take on people who I truly feel like I can help and who are ready to do the work. Because it does take a minute. You're not coming to me for a magic pill. You're coming to me to help be your guide, to help uncover what's going on for you.
That's right. So so you spoke on the 5 root causes of chronic fatigue.
Yeah.
So what are those 5 root causes that the system addresses, that your system addresses?
Yeah, let me I wanna answer that, but first I just wanna go back to something you said because I
Okay.
think it's really important that we wanna highlight it here, which is you said that you know 9 times out of 10 if there's something going on with your body that's wrong, and I wanna say that is so important. You know your body better than anybody else. I've had too many patients come to me after seeing many, many doctors who were told by their physicians that all of your labs are normal, you look great, your labs are normal, there's nothing wrong with you, or I can't find anything wrong with you. If you know something's off, then please continue getting support, continue asking questions, continue finding people that can help you until you get someone who goes, "Oh, yes, I see you. I get it. I understand. I do see that these things are out of balance, or this is what you need to treat." So this is just it's just a me standing on my soapbox to say believe in you and believe in your experience of your body and what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and find the people that are willing to support you in believing in you. So that's yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So 5 root causes. So the root causes that I uncover, you may have 1, 2, 3, or all 5 of these. It depends on your symptoms. It depends on how long you've been sick, depends on your body. And one of them is looking at that I call the gateway root cause is looking at this thing called the hormone triangle. So it's looking at what's happening with your hormonal system, your thyroid gland, which is right here, and it's really runs the metabolism in all of your cells. So it can be hyped up or slowed down. You have your adrenal glands, which are right um, kind of above your kidneys, underneath your rib cage in your back. That's why I'm going back here. And these are your stress response glands. And then your gonads. So testes, male, ovaries, female. This is a hormone triangle in our body that always needs to work together. And it can get easily dysregulated, especially if we're under a lot of stress. So those of us who have had traumatic things happen to us in our childhood, that's a stress thing. If you have had if you're going under relationship stress, financial stress, if you are in sick, this is a stress on your body. If you're doing really great, but you're just pushing yourself, drinking coffee all the time, trying to be super high achiever and pushing yourself, that becomes a stress. And that stress can throw that whole system off. I call it a gateway root cause because that stress takes your body out of its natural state of being in balance, in health, in vitality, and it takes it into a state where you are no longer in what we call creation or healing mode, and you are in a dysregulated mode where your body starts to break down. And this is why we see so much chronic disease like cancer and diabetes and this long COVID myalgic encephalitis in the society. Is one of the reasons is because we are so stressed out that we get into this altered pattern and our body never gets the chance to heal. Now, so that's the number one. Number two is looking at chronic infections. Chronic infection or any kind of infection. So this can be bacterial, fungal, viral infection, and these can get reactivated in our body when our bodies are under stress and cause us to feel really, really tired. And they literally go inside the cells and start sucking all the sugar out of your cells and taking your energy for themselves to replicate. And it's kind of like having a little parasite inside of your cells. It just drains you dry. I don't know about you, but we have these woods here with this kind of ivy that's an invasive species, and it goes up into the trees, and it looks really cool when it's growing, but it sucks all the energy out of the trees and eventually kills the trees. And it's kind of like that. It just these viruses get in your cells and they just drain you dry. So that's the second really common root cause, and that's happening a lot with people with long COVID. Is they are reactivating Epstein-Barr virus or some other virus. The third is looking at your mitochondria, which are inside your cells. We all have them. If your mitochondria were all destroyed, you would be dead in 3 seconds, like that. Your mitochondria are so essential for life. In those cartoons where somebody throws the poison and everybody dies, like that, it's like cyanide, like that's killing your mitochondria. That's why they die so fast. It's mitochondria death. And that is, and unfortunately, these mitochondria are incredibly vulnerable to so many things in our planet right now that they tend to get pretty sick. And those mitochondria can get broken down from the stress, from the viruses, and from other things. So looking at mitochondrial function is really, really important. And you can also inherit patterns from your mother in terms of having your mitochondria not be as healthy. It's very likely that some of this myalgic encephalitis, chronic fatigue, long COVID, that there may be, at least for some of us, an inherited genetic pattern that comes down through the maternal line that makes it so that there may be a more autoimmune-like thing happening inside our mitochondria. I won't be surprised if we find that in the future. That hasn't been confirmed yet, but we do see patterns of family where they tend to get this condition. And so then the fourth one is looking at toxic exposures. Mold is huge. So whether you live where I am in the Pacific Northwest and it's damp half the time of the year, people have a lot of mold in their basements, their windows, or if you live in a hot place where there's air conditioning, you can get a lot of mold in air conditioning systems. So mold is tough. And mold, I mean, you think about it. I mean, we've been living with mold forever, but it seems like the mold is getting more toxic and interacting with other things in the environment and we are starting to have, more of us are having an immune reaction to mold or mold byproducts called mycotoxins. So mycotoxins can be a toxin in your body. Heavy metals like mercury and lead, aluminum, these can all be really hard on that mitochondria and make you sick, as can the pesticides and herbicides that they're spraying on our food. So that's another thing that can really wear down your energy and make it so that your body doesn't function normally. And standard lab tests, this stuff doesn't show up. You have to ask different kinds of questions than your conventional doctor is going to ask you to uncover if this is one of your root causes. And you also may need to do some other kinds of unconventional kinds of testing, some functional medicine testing to figure out if that's happening in your body. And then the fifth root cause is looking at your limbic emotional system. We have this thing in our brain called our limbic brain. So where it is always surveying for safety and danger. Am I safe? Am I dangerous? Am I safe? Am I dangerous? This limbic brain is connected to a couple of different really important parts of our brain in our body. It's part of that limbic brain is also the part of your brain that holds memories. And so the survival piece is essential. It is the part of our ancestors who were like, oh, I don't eat that berry because it makes me sick. I remember that. Or as a kid, it's that part of our system that says, oh, I'm not supposed to cross the street because I might get hit by a car. And then as an adult, we internalize that and we remember it. The challenge is that that limbic system can get jacked up and overreactive and overprotective and have a very negative impact on your whole physiology and make you feel exhausted or have increased pain signaling. How it does this is that that limbic system is connected with the vagus nerve, which is this nerve that goes all the way down the body. It's the longest nerve in the body, and it goes into your liver, into your stomach, to your intestines. And it's always picking up information. So if you're eating food that is making you feel inflamed or sick, if you've got gut problems, if your liver is toxic, if you're feeling stressed out, scared, angry, depressed, it's picking up those signals all the time and sending them to the limbic brain saying, hey, we're not so good down here. It's not so good down here. It's not so good down here. The limbic brain can take some of that, but after a while, the limbic brain starts to really pick up that information. And then if it layers filters on top of that of, I was not safe in childhood, either all the time or enough times that it impacted your psyche, which is true, frankly, for most of us and some more than others. And then you layer that on with, if you are sick, that becomes feeling like a stress to yourself. Or if you're having other frustrations in your life or fears in your life, or mom was always anxious, so now you're always anxious, or you inherited generational trauma, which we do. So those of us who have trauma of genocides and, slavery or whatever it is in our history, that is in us, and not to say that from a place of we need to stay in our victim around that at all, but from a place of saying that that becomes part of that subconscious processing that can impact how that limbic brain works. And there may be a level of needing to heal that so that your body can come back into health and balance. So if that limbic brain is tilting to the side of it's not safe, it starts to throw out signals to slow you down, to shut you down, basically to say, go, I know it's dangerous out there. You need to go hide. So go hide under this rock, go back in your cave, go somewhere where it's safe. And it will throw out signals of fatigue and pain. It will heighten your pain signals, and it will also slow down that mitochondria and put that mitochondria into a slower mode. So you literally don't have the energy to function. It will throw off your hormones and throw off your immune system. So these are the 5 root causes that in that time I really looked at and I started to uncover. I'll be honest that in the last bit of time, we're also seeing this other thing that is just clearly a pattern across the board with people who are struggling with myalgic encephalitis, long COVID, chronic fatigue patterns, is this thing called neuroinflammation. And truly, all of these things cause this level of neuroinflammation. And that neuroinflammation is also what causes things like ADHD and depression and anxiety, as well as all the dementias, the Parkinson's, the Alzheimer's, all those things. And it also is what is causing the brain fog that many of us experience with long COVID and myalgic encephalitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. So that is another piece that I'm always looking for, is that level of neuroinflammation. Now, the truth is that neuroinflammation is still caused by one of those root causes.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot for anyone to.
I know it's a lot.
It's a lot for anyone to take in, but that was interesting, especially the part about the limbic brain and the limbic nerve. So it's kind of like, the brain has always been what I call the computer of your body. So
Yep.
the limbic nerve would be like the Ethernet cable or something like that.
Yeah. I
runs
actually think that's kind of a good analogy, the Ethernet cable, because it's really picking up signals. I guess you know what you're doing right now. You're running into my limitations of really understanding exactly what the Ethernet cable does. But I guess I would say that it's that vagus nerve is literally picking up signals from all over your body, and it's not just picking up, it's picking up chemical signals, hormonal signals, and also energy patterns. The different cells vibrate at different oscillations, different waveforms, and it's also picking up that information, and all of those have a huge impact on each one of your cells, and it goes up into that limbic brain. So yeah, so is that an Ethernet cable?
Yeah, pretty much. Or you can, since everything is going more wireless, you could say a Wi-Fi router would be
See,
more.
that actually works better for me. It's all out there. It's all coming in.
I just use the cable because I plug directly into it, like the since that goes directly to the brain. But so what inspired you to combine functional medicine with deep conscious work in your practice?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What inspired you to combine functional medicine with deep conscious work in your practice?
Yeah. So functional medicine is really looking at how does the body work? What is a healthy body? What makes a body healthy? And how do you get it to be more vital instead of just looking at a sickness? In healthcare, we often look at, oh, you're sick. What do we need to do to fix that? Instead of going, how do we get this body to maintain its health or get to a place where it is healthy again? And that's functional medicine, which is naturopathic medicine I'm trained in. So that was just part of what I was trained in and what I do. In terms of the subconscious work, that was one of the things that was huge for me when I was sick in bed, when I was talking about being in bed, staring at the ceiling, not able to eat or drink. I was blessed to have, I knew I needed therapy, and I had a couple different therapists come in that talked to me, and none of them really resonated. One of them saved my life because she just looked at me and she said, "You have to eat if you want to live." And so I remember forcing myself to eat 7 almonds. Like, literally just it took, like, 2 hours to get those 7 almonds down. It was so hard for me to eat. Yeah, it was really intense. Because previous to that, I was like, almonds, like, whatever, I was eating all the time. Like, that was never an issue for me. It was just, it was something that was really intense, but I chose to live, and it was choosing to live was eating that food. Um, but the but I knew she wasn't the therapist to really help me crack what was going on with me. Sorry for the dog.
Oh,
She'll
you're
stop in a
fine.
second.
Sure.
So the thing that was amazing was I had a hypnotherapist come to my house, and she worked with me twice a week. And we were able to get to this layer that nobody else had ever been able to help me get to before. If you think about your mind, it's a pie. Only if you think of a tiny slice of pie, it's 5% of that pie. 5% is just a few bites of pie. And those few bites of pie are your conscious thoughts. That's you thinking, that is how much we're actually consciously thinking about who we are, where we are, what we're going to do, which is really hard to realize because we're so aware of our conscious thoughts that we think that that's everything we are, but it's just a fraction of what we are. We're mostly our unconscious thoughts. Many of those unconscious thoughts are controlling our physiology, like our heartbeat, our breath rate, what we're thinking, everything you're picking up from talking with me right now, from the room, from my dog barking, all of these things are triggering unconscious thoughts, and you're only aware of a fraction of them right now. The thing is that your unconscious mind holds every single memory or experience you've had your whole lifetime, including every auditory, visual, and emotional experience you've had since you were in the womb, in your mama's womb, to present time. All of that generational stuff, including, if whatever your soul journey is, all of this information is in there. And the subconscious mind loves a good story. You know how we love a good story? This mind loves a good story. So it starts to make connections. Oh, when I hear a man with that voice, it means this about me. Oh, when I see that flower, that means this. It can be good things, it can be bad things. And those become our beliefs and our perceptions about what the world really is. But it's all in this unconscious level. So, what was happening to me when I was in bed and I was in my early 30s was a lot of those things that I hadn't had time to look at or to examine that were in my unconscious mind, some that I had inherited, some that I got from childhood, were really taking over my body and dominating my physiology at that time. And this illness was an absolute gift. And it's a time that I call low tide, where here in the Pacific Northwest, where we have an ocean, if there are rocks that the ocean goes over during high tide, it's just kind of like little lumps in the water, little waves in the water. But at low tide, you can see the big rocks and you can see what's making the waves in your lifetime. And so it was a low tide, and I could actually take a look at what were those rocks that were impacting my beliefs, my feelings, my experiences in my life. And so it was working on that subconscious mind that literally cracked me open. I I mean, she came and worked with me for weeks, a couple times a week. It was pretty full on therapy, and she could see the healer in me, and she knew that there was something for me to break through and to see. And so she really hung in there with me. But there was a day she's like, I can't get to this part. You're going to have to come into the office and you're going to have to work with this other practitioner of mine. We're going to both work on you at the same time. I was like, how am I supposed to come to the office? Like, I can't even go to the bathroom by myself. Like, I literally have to have somebody hold my arm to walk me down the hall. I haven't been downstairs in 2 months. Like, how am I supposed to get to the office? So she's like, I don't know. You'll have to figure it out. So my mom came over a few days later and sat me in the bathtub in a chair and washed my hair and washed my body. And I was exhausted. Went back to bed for a couple of days to get over that. And then the day of the appointment, my husband walks me down the stairs. We put the seat back in the car. I cover up my eyes because I can't handle the visual stimulation of driving, of all the motion. And we get to the therapist's office. He walks me in, sits me down in the chair. I was there for 2.5 hours with two therapists working on me at the same time doing hypnosis. And at some point they just hit some symbology in that just impacted my psyche, and they knew they had gotten something, and they just worked with me until they cracked open whatever this pattern was in my brain. And I remember standing up from that and feeling different. And then my husband coming to the door and opening it, and him just looking at me and going, "You're back." And he had like a tear in his eye. It was like, "Oh my God, you came back." And I was able to get into the car. I was able to sit up in the seat. I was able to drive. We went to a park, and I was able to walk about 20 steps down. It was in the middle of winter, and there was this big, huge, mossy tree, had moss on the back of it, and there was this beautiful sunlight coming on the tree. I just watched that green light on that tree, and it was a huge shift. And that's the thing that got me out of bed and onto the couch, and that was it. And that's when I realized the power of the subconscious mind. And so since then, that's also what I bring into my practice when I'm working with people, have different tools, because I know that sometimes there are things that we can't see that are holding us back from our next step in our healing, and it can be really helpful to have a guide to help you through that path.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree. That's man, that's interesting just to hear, like, he wasn't able to walk or really move. And then, after that you were able to, I mean, going from going from having to be bedridden to walking 20 steps is a big difference, big
Right,
change.
right. Yeah.
So so can you share maybe um a success story that kind of sticks out in your mind, of
Mhm.
a patient who significantly improved using your methods?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Couple people come to mind. I will talk about this one because she was an acupuncturist, so she was also a practitioner herself, and she was doing everything right. She was having a great diet, good sleep, taking all the right supplements, and yet she felt exhausted all the time. She felt like she'd been sick since she was a little kid, and she just basically came to me and said, Dr. Jenny, I'm out of hope. Like, I'm seriously out of hope. I don't know what I can do. I'm not sure how I can continue living this way. I am so exhausted and so sick, and I feel like I have tried everything and gone to everybody, and nothing has happened. And she said, "You're recommended by somebody I know, and I wasn't going to try anymore, but I'm just trying you because of that, because she told me to come." So we ended up working together. And what I'll say about this person is that she did everything that we talked about doing, and that made a huge difference. And that's really why I think she made so much progress so quickly. But we ended up looking and seeing, we sort of ran through that list, those 5 things, ruling in and ruling out. Does she have a chronic viral infection? Turned out she did. Does she have toxic levels? She actually had toxic heavy metals and molds in her body. We looked at her limbic brain emotional state. We looked at all of these different things and ruled them in and ruled them out. And that's really what I would call phase 1 of the process, is figuring out what are your root causes. And then it's also important to look at what are your health foundations. Her sleep was terrible and had been since she was a kid. So we were working on that piece to get her to sleep, because if you're not sleeping, you're not healing. So we focused on those, and within 3 months, which is actually a very short time, it usually takes people 1 or 2 years to really get out of these deep patterns. But for her, in 3 months, she wrote me back and she said, "I have hit every single one of my goals that I had with you, and I want to keep going because now I have more goals and more things that I want to help." And so she continued to work with me, and we're able to do even deeper work now, where she's going through a very deep cleanse right now and working on some deeper stuff, on some of her deeper subconscious things. And she has been able to experience so much more energy, so much more mental clarity, and she's able to sleep much better, which has been amazing. So she's one of the people I think about. And then the other person I think about is this woman who was, I think she was in her 60s, but she'd been sick for decades. And she was a social worker, and she was in an abusive relationship that she stayed in because she was afraid if she left, she was too tired to work, she would just be living in her car and be houseless. And so she just couldn't do anything, and he was mad at her because he would come home and she hadn't done the housework, but she was too tired to do the housework. She just had to be on the couch all day, and it was a real struggle for her. She came into my group program and we worked together there, and it was very beautiful to see her opening up and sharing her story with the other women in the group, and she ended up making really great friends there, which was pretty beautiful to watch. And we did a sub usually do the subconscious sessions one-on-one, but we did it in this very safe group setting with her permission. And she had a massive breakthrough doing subconscious work where she worked with her inner child. And to this day, she talks about how powerful that is. She messaged me about 6 months later. She said, I'm getting divorced. I'm moving down to Florida. I am feeling so much better. And she now is able to work full time. She had a very stressful divorce and moving and trying to get a new job and all that. It was a lot of stress, but it did not reactivate her condition, didn't reactivate her chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalitis, which is amazing. And she's discovered what she needs to eat and how she needs to live. And now she's living a full life and she's really happy. She's like, it's very beautiful to watch. So she's somebody that I hold dear in my heart as a story of just watching somebody who really didn't think, who just figured that was it for her life. And she was able to now blossom into this whole other way of being herself and truly living to her full potential. And she's doing her artwork, which is fun. I'm sorry, I lost your voice. Your
Sorry, my phone
sound.
had vibrated, so I had put it on mute. But yeah. So what would you say are some common misconceptions about chronic fatigue and about chronic fatigue? I'm sorry.
I'd say the common misconception about chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalitis, and long COVID, there are many misconceptions. One of them is that there's nothing you can do about it except wait and rest. And I 100% disagree. That's a limitation of the conventional medical model in terms of not having a test and a treatment for it. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do to get better. I have seen so many people be able to increase their energy when they address their root causes. So myth number one is there's nothing you can do about this condition. You just got to suck it up and deal with it. I'd say the second misconception is that it's all in your head, or that it's your fault, or that you're being lazy. And that's also not true. It's easy to think that because the society really has really sidelined people who are struggling with this condition forever. And it's only now, since the pandemic, with more research money going towards long COVID, that we have more understanding of it. But even then, because the main symptom is feeling tired, people and everybody feels tired to some level, that it's really easy for your friends and your family to misunderstand, and for your physicians to also not really appreciate how exhausted you are. So I'd say the other misconception is that it's in your head, or you're lazy, or that you're making up. You're not crazy. Like I said, you know your body better than anybody else. If you're not feeling good, you need to figure out what it is and what's going on with you.
Yep. Yep. I would agree. I would agree. So so how do you so how do you help patients build resilience
Oh.
while trying to regain their energy?
Yeah. I love that question, and I love that that's what your podcast is all about, is resilience, because I think it's really beautiful how we can share our stories and help each other, in those times when we're kind of feeling down, to go like, "Oh, they made it. Like, look at that story," you know? Like, I find
Right.
your story really powerful. So, um, I think the resilience comes throughout the whole journey. The resilience comes through, there's actually, I believe there's a lot of resilience that comes from being willing to face the reality of your situation, and being willing to face it head on, and to know that I am strong enough to really look at what is going on with me, and I am willing to do something about it. I mean, right there is step number one into resilience, because that's you believing in you, and that makes you stronger. It increases your self-esteem. It increases your agency, when you're willing to own it instead of somebody's doing this to me, or they don't get me, or they don't understand, and staying in your victim. You're taking ownership of what is on your plate, what you have inherited, what is happening in your body. You take ownership of it and take action. So that's resilience number one. I'd say the next phase of resilience, so that's people walking in the door to work with me. They're already there. That's already happened. That happened before we met. I'd say the second thing that is happening with people when they're establishing resiliency is tapping into even deeper understanding of what their body is saying to them. Whenever you have a symptom, whether it's a headache, a stomach ache, a shift in your mood, any of those things, that's your body signaling you. It's saying something. Often anxiety or having deep fatigue, it's like your subconscious mind is going, hey, excuse me, hey, I have something to tell you, I've got something I need to share with you. Sometimes these illnesses can be huge openings into us living in a completely different way, like I said, with this person who wasn't leaving the abusive relationship and finding her artistic self, but did once she got out of this fatigue pattern. She found her real self. So I think the resilience comes in empowering yourself to take action and understanding what works with your body. When I'm working with people, there isn't a protocol, there isn't a pill, there isn't a supplement, there isn't a anything that works for everybody. What we are doing is figuring out what works for your body to treat your root causes so that you can have energy again. And so it's individualized. That is empowering to know that you're understanding how to run you better and how to work better inside of yourself. And so I think that this is really builds resilience. And then I think the fourth thing I would say about resilience is honestly, it's the realism that the journey of healing is not from, oh, I'm down here and I go straight up to here to vitality. Just like just like relationships are not Hollywood movies, and financial overnight financial success is not really a reality. It's like none of those dreams really exist. The truth of it is that people come in here and then they start feeling better, and then they're going to plateau or dip, and then they're going to go up, and they're going to plateau and dip and go up, and they're going to work their way up here. And there's resilience and understanding that this is a journey, and they are in control of this journey, and they get to choose who gets to be their guide. And they also understand there's a lot of resilience that comes when you're in that plateau and that dip. And the first thing you think is, oh, I'm all the way back down here again, but you're not. You're just in this dip. Your body is dealing with something else, or you slipped up in something. You're learning something here. And every time you learn something about yourself, learn something about your body, and you get feedback, that builds resilience that sticks with you for the rest of your life.
Yep, I agree. Um, so what are some practical steps that individuals can take to manage their fatigue at home?
So it depends on what level of fatigue you have. I talk about people with myalgic encephalitis, long COVID, chronic fatigue. They talk about tired, like wine connoisseurs talk about fine wines. There are so many different kinds of tired. It's not just plain old tired. So those of you who are what I would call energy normals and get tired after a long day of work or a bad night of sleep, well, that's just taking care of yourself, getting the sleep you need, getting the rest, doing stuff where you're connecting with others, having fun, go dance, go play some music. These things really help us regulate. Being in community helps us regulate, eating good food. All of those things are really important. For people who are starting to get really stressed out, and you feel finding yourself doing what I call energy budgeting, where you're canceling out of going out with friends after work, or you're not showing up at birthday parties on the weekend because you're too tired, that's where you start, that needs to start to get your attention. And I'd say the first things to do are to get checked out and be sure it's not something easy to fix like anemia, or challenging like a cancer diagnosis. Like, you should get checked by somebody. If you're told everything's all normal, then you need to start digging a little bit deeper in. And you might need to um, you might need to consult with a specialist who really understands all the different root causes. But what I would say is many, many people, if you really want sort of the what can you do on your own, like the number one thing that would help most of us is to regain what I call a normal circadian rhythm. And this really goes back to that original root cause that I talked about with that stress response and all of those hormones. If we just would do the things that we're told all the time, but we think we don't need to do it yet. And I didn't do this in my 20s or 30s either, which is go to bed at a good hour for you at about the same time every night, get up at about the same time every morning, eat at about the same time every day, and make sure you're getting some kind of exercise, you're drinking lots of water, and you're eating good food. Seriously, if you do those things, like most of the time, the body's going to come back into balance and you're going to feel better. It's when those things don't work that you need to get more help because you might have a reactivated virus or mitochondrial dysfunction or too many toxins in your body or something going on in your limbic brain that you need support with.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So, do you let's see, uh, let's skip that one. We already answered that. So do you feel that social media and modern lifestyle have an impact on chronic fatigue?
You mean in terms of making it worse or making it better or what? Impact in what
E-
way?
either or. I mean, is it helpful? Is it helpful to it? Is it helpful in certain ways and then negative in certain ways? Like what would be your like
I
what is
I
your
would say I would say yes, it's negative in some ways and beneficial in others. I just like any social media can be. I think that the benefit of social media for people who are struggling with this condition is they don't feel so isolated. It's a very, very isolating condition. You feel really alone. Usually people in your family, your closest friends don't really get it. And people often end up losing friends because they can't work out with their workout buddies anymore. They can't go to the parties. I know personally I had friends that I loved who were like, "Hey, we're going to this bar class. Do you want to come?" And I kept saying no. "Hey, we're going to this party. You want to come?" I kept saying no. And then they stop asking. They
right?
just kind of forget about you. And this is really common. So, one of the great things about social media, and I see this on Facebook groups and groups I'm in with people who are struggling with this, is they're not alone. And there's somebody who understands what it's like. And there's just somebody out there who gets it. The women and men who are in my groups that we're guiding along in this process, they feel the same way. They every week we meet, they're like, I love being here because I don't have to explain my situation. You guys get it. And I'm able to just kind of move on and figure out the next best thing for me to do. And you understand me. And there's so much value here. So I'd say that's been one of the things that's been beneficial in terms of social media is understanding it. And I think honestly, the share of information is fantastic. Being able to share research papers or new ideas and information is really great. And that happens like this now, right? The drawback is the same for all social media situations. It's too easy for people, it can be hard to be in a comparison game of seeing, wow, everybody looks like their life is so amazing on social media. They're traveling, they're out, they're, going kayaking, they're, going to watch the Tour de France and they're biking across the mountains in Switzerland or whatever they're doing. It's easy to compare and go, and I'm stuck here in bed feeling exhausted or I'm lucky if I can walk to the park. So that I think part that comparison game can be really hard on social media no matter what you're dealing with, right? No matter what it is you're dealing with, that comparison game is really poison for all of us, and I think we all need to just know that we're okay wherever we are, and to just if you're feeling jealous, it's just put it on there in the goal list, like that's something I want to have, but to get yourself out of the comparison game. I'd say the other drawback of social media, as much as I love the quick passive information, when it's valid information, that's really great, but there can also be misinformation that gets spread really quickly. An example of this was something that I saw at the beginning of the pandemic. There was somebody on social media who talked about this one plant as it being really bad to take, elderberry flower, which can help your immune system. And there was this big thing of, don't take elderberry flower. If you have COVID, it can cause a cytokine storm and kill you. There's this paper that says that. And so I went and looked at the paper, and that's not what the paper said. This thing was posted by somebody who was not a physician, not a research scientist. They didn't read the whole paper. They just read one little line. And this thing spread like wildfire. And it was frankly misinformation. And there can just be so much misinformation. And I see that over and over and over again, where people get things mixed up in science. They, a lot of the chemicals in our body have very similar names with completely different actions in them. And people start mislabeling and misnaming and think they know stuff that they don't know. And, I may have done some of that too at different times. I mean, I think we can all be blamed for that at times, but it's a problem because the information goes so fast. There's nobody to really check it and go, is this actually valid or not?
Right, right. I would agree. So, before we get out of here,
Yeah.
is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience, or another story you want to tell, anything like that?
I would just say, if you're out there and you are struggling with low energy, I would say, don't just know that there are answers out there for you. You just need to keep knocking on doors until you find the answer that fits you. And if you know somebody or love somebody who is struggling with fatigue, please let them know that you see them, you believe them, you hear them, and let them know that there are answers out there for them, and encourage them and help them to find the answers they need to have the vitality. Because I really believe it's such a waste for us to be struggling with fatigue when there are things for us to be doing out there in the world. The world needs you to be your best right now, and I know you can heal.
Mhm. That's right. I would agree. So, I would like to thank you, Dr. Jennings, for taking the time out of your super busy schedule to come on and have a conversation with me, talk to the audience, and discuss how you overcame adversity, and to give them tips on how maybe they can overcome adversity as well. So, I definitely want to tell you I appreciate you for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate you too. You're just an amazing human, and thank you so much for the work you're doing.
And I just try to do what I can. I'm
Yeah,
blessed. I went through things as well, so we
yeah,
make the world better one person at a time. That's the goal. So.
I know. I know. It's
So
beautiful. Yeah.
thank you everyone for watching. You guys have just watched another episode of All in All with Alex, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace. And